inflation, by definition, monetary inflation is devaluing the dollar, having an unstable dollar. But they're not focused on a stable dollar. They think the way you bring down inflation is depressing the economy, making people poor. Unfortunately, other central banks, like the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, believe the same thing.
In a recent interview, Forbes media chairman Steve Forbes talks about how the Fed's preferred inflation gauge accelerated more than expected. Forbes believes that a depressed economy is the only thing that will bring inflation down. Before listening to him, please ensure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's dive into his last interview now.
Give me your top line take on this core inflation number actually heating up in the last month.
Well, it simply goes to show that the Biden administration is living in la-la land, and the idea that their spending is going to bring it down is preposterous. The only thing that's going to bring it down is a depressed economy. And by the combination of the tax increases, the regulations you're getting from this administration, plus the Federal Reserve determined to put this economy in recession, you're going to have hard times ahead. So prices will come down because businesses are going to be going out of business and people aren't going to have the wherewithal to buy more stuff. So you got two bad actors there, the Federal Reserve and the White House, both guilty of economic malpractice, doing the exact opposite of what was done in the early 1980s, when a combination of deregulation, tax cuts, and a stable dollar set off a 20-year boom.
But Steve, you have to think that with the Fed raising rates, they have a lot of work still to do. If that's the mission they're on, it's like the only way we're going to address inflation is by tanking the economy, by raising rates. They have a lot more work to do to get us down to 2%, right?
Well, the whole thing about inflation is, inflation by definition, monetary inflation, is devaluing the dollar, having an unstable dollar. But they're not focused on a stable dollar. They think the way you bring down inflation is depressing the economy, making people poor. Unfortunately, other central banks, like the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, believe the same thing. So that's why you're going to get a global downturn unnecessarily. What you want to do is make the dollar stable instead of going up and down like a yo-yo, and having more production, more productivity, a more happier, more expanding economy. Right. But they're doing the exact opposite.
So your point is, don't attack demand, right? Let's improve our supply, so you don't have to kill the economy, kill families, kill wages, kill business. Work on the supply side, and you can get yourself out of this.
Yeah, because you know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen, John. When the economy goes into recession, you have a global crisis coming along. The Federal Reserve and other central banks are going to be under huge pressure to ease up and to devalue currencies again. And you're going to see talk about stimulus again. Got to stimulate the economy. It's doing so poorly. Got an election coming up. So they're going to go back on the same old treadmill, disastrous course of policies that got us in the mess in the first place. So the chest beating of Jerome Powell, we're going to conquer inflation. Rah, rah, rah. No, they're going to cave when the political pressure comes, when you have this global downturn. That's what's so sad. We're going to suffer for nothing.
So, Steve, play this out for me. I mean, how do you see this, whether it's 6 months or 2 years from now with this strategy? Again, raising rates, printing money, the Congress and the president borrowing, printing, spending. How do you play this out?
Well, it's going to depend in part on what happens in November. If the Republicans get control of Congress, that'll put at least some brake on the spending. But next year, as the economy gets in real trouble, with prospects suddenly looking at 2024, when you have Europe tanking, China's in trouble, Japan's going to have very real troubles. Their national debt is twice ours proportionately. The pressure's going to be on, do something. People are suffering. So you're going to hear a lot of pressure on Congress, and the Federal Reserve is going to be under a lot of pressure to back off. And I don't think so they don't know what they're doing. The White House doesn't know what it's doing. And that's what eventually is going to bring big changes in 2024. But in the meantime, we're going to pay an unnecessary price in terms of a downturn.
Steve, I mean, if I look at the White House, I may disagree with the policy positions of Biden's advisors, but they're smart people. I would hold out that they're smart people. And here you have them basically telling Biden and Democrats, we can continue to spend, massive amounts of money. $400 billion in the student loan bailout, $1.2 trillion in infrastructure, the COVID package at the start of the presidency, almost $2 trillion, the CHIPS Act, $280 billion. You can go on forever and go, This is insanity, Steve. The spending. Aren't there any smart people like Steve Forbes in the White House to go, whoa, 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 whoa. This is really bad for the economy, and it's going to have really negative consequences for Americans who we claim we want to help.
Well, the thing is, it's the way they've been taught their economics. They've been taught that government spending stimulates the economy, not realizing where does the government get the resources to spend? Government doesn't create those resources. The private sector creates those resources. So if you don't have those resources, how do you spend? You do it by printing money. And so you have these very smart people. I'm sure their IQs can boil water. But when it comes to judgment, when it comes to judging how the real world works, they're absolutely oblivious. And we see it with the Federal Reserve, printing money last year to fare thee well when clearly the COVID crisis, the worst was over. They used gimmicks to try to keep some of that money out of the economy. And now today, they're going from weakening the dollar to over-strengthening the dollar, putting up, artificially raising interest rates. And so you just have to shake your head. How can so many smart people be so wrong? But they all reinforce each other. That's the problem. They're in bubble land.
I mean, Steve, isn't this a little trick? I'm not going to raise your taxes. I'm not going to raise taxes on, the average American or even wealthy Americans. What I'm going to do is I'm going to print money. And by printing money, I'm going to devalue the currency. So it's a hidden tax because your dollar goes less far. And again, the rich guys can afford it, but the middle class and poor Americans are getting crushed with this devalued dollar, this inflation that doesn't allow them to actually fund their lifestyles.
Well, that's right. And inflation is the biggest hidden and most hideous tax of all because people don't understand what in the world is going on. Why are these prices going up? So my wages go up 5, 8, 10%, but prices are going up 10, 15, 20%. And so it also breeds a bad political environment. And so, yes, those people are getting hit hard by it. And then they're going to get hit hard because the Federal Reserve wants more people out of work. They try to sugarcoat it. Oh, we want a soft landing. But they always end up giving a crash landing. Absolutely unnecessary. And I hope out of this is going to come a big change. What they've been doing for the last 10 or 15 years, this just didn't start with the Biden administration, sadly. We had a respite for 4 years under President Trump. But now we're back to the bad old stuff for a generation. I think you're going to see a big change coming in 2024, the likes of which we haven't seen since Ronald Reagan and the early 1980s.
Steve, I spent almost 10 years in Washington, D.C., and to answer my own question, you see some really smart people with a lot of different degrees from some of the finest institutions, and they had some of the dumbest ideas that didn't have any common sense behind them that actually hurt the average people that most members of Congress were elected to serve. It hurts them the most, and it's incredibly frustrating, to your point, on how bad this has been for the average American and the American economy. 20 seconds to you.
Well, it's unnecessarily bad, and the only solace we can take is from this bad, we're going to get some real good. And for a generation, we're going to have prosperity, and finally we're going to get the roaring 20s going in the right direction instead of the disaster we have now.
Steve
America
Forbes.
always comes back, and we're going to do it again.